Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, your weekly comic book interview podcast brought to you by Sketch.com.
All right. That was Patrick Brower, the guest for the week, and he got most of it right. It's a weekly interview podcast about all things comics.
All things comics.
There
okay. Now that you say it, I got it.
I love the fact that in the week that the intro is being mixed up because the return of the long-missed, much-loved second theme song to the show, Wolfpack's outro, is here. You also did the intro, which is, I think, only the second time an episode has had an intro by somebody else. The other time was when Liana Kangas actually hosted an episode and did the entire intro themselves, which was fantastic. But anyways,
nice.
This is David Harper, the host of Off Panel, and the person who did the intro is Patrick Brower, the co-owner of Chicago's finest comic shop, Challengers Comics and Conversation. Patrick, thank you for coming on.
David, thank you for having me, and thank you for having this be a yearly tradition that I know I personally look forward to, as I'm sure every single listener does as well.
Wait, we do this every year?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Sometimes twice a year.
Oh my God. You're blowing my mind right now.
I mean, I do it monthly in my head, but I think people only hear it once a year. January
is the tradition. It's a perfect way to kick off the year because I like finding out what's going on the retailer front. And you are also not participating on the Sketch Retailer Year in Review because you're doing it for Publishers Weekly because you're a fancy man. But we're not here to talk about that yet. You are currently walking around Challengers. How was today in the shop?
You know what? It started off real slow. The last couple of Januaries in Chicago have all been really gray, really overcast, really cold, wet. One a couple years ago, we didn't get the sun the entire month. So this was a really bleak gray day. And after the first 2 hours, I'm like, man, this day is dead. But it picked up and wound up being a very solid Saturday by the end of it. And of course, because you and I had plans right after work, of course, right at 4:50 is when everybody comes in and has all these questions and stacks of books, which I'll take it. I'll take the stacks of books.
Not the questions, though.
I mean, they were fine. I always love it when you spend a solid 10 minutes recommending things for somebody that doesn't have a clear idea of what they want. And then they ignore all your suggestions and just grab something random.
Well, did they grab something good?
Yeah, they did. They got the Milestone Compendium.
Oh, okay. That's pretty cool. Wow, Compendium. I imagine that's a solid result. If they just went and got one random floppy comic, you'd probably be like, eh.
They were looking at trades. My coworker today, Samantha, spent a lot of time pitching them on superhero starter books because I think it was a gift for someone. But then they wound up just grabbing Milestone. So fair.
That works. So we're here to talk about how 2022 was for Challengers. But before we get into that, I want to contextualize. I want to set the stage. For the people who did not listen to last year's podcast, and you should, every January, Patrick is the best. 2021 was a good year for Challengers, right?
Yes. It was our strongest business year, but it's a year that I think no business should look at as a benchmark for anything because it was such a bonkers pandemic money year. You know, toward the end of 2020, things were like that as well, but most cities were shut down, so people didn't have a full year of sales to gauge. But with 2021, that is the year that you look at and think, okay, I got to take this out of all my yearly sales because 2019 is what standard businesses should use as a benchmark, not 2021. However, we did technically beat 2021. Our sales were up 0.5% for the year.
In 2022?
In 2022, yes. We were up 0.5 of a percentage point, which is basically flat. And I have not done the cost analysis yet to see what we spent to make that. And I'm pretty sure we spent more in 2022 than we did in 2021. So it would, kind of wash out the fact that we went up. But we went up.
Is that increase in cost? Is that like staff? Is that overhead? What is that?
It's staff, it's product, it is utilities because, it costs more to heat the store and electricity is up. Heat is up a lot in Chicago as far as costs go. It's definitely staff. It is rising insurance costs because it's not just health insurance, but it's unemployment insurance and one other kind of insurance that you don't even realize that you have to pay for when you start bringing more people on board. It's like, oh, yeah, it's just that. But also, our discounts are less at different distributors than they would have been had we stayed with Diamond across the board. Specifically, we use Ingram to get a lot of the stuff that we can't get elsewhere, but they're one of the worst discounts we get compared to Diamond or Penguin Random House or Lunar. And we only do it when it's like, well, we want the book, so we're paying more to get it, so we have, less money coming in from the sale of that kind of a thing. And even though like we use Ingram as a last resort, we still wind up, doing at least one order a month with them, which then, cuts into profits.
Better than not having the comics, of course.
You're absolutely right. Another major cost is having our entire inventory online via Shopify. There's so many hidden costs and fees because it's not just having a Shopify subscription and using Shopify's point of sale, which is a monthly fee, but every functionality that you want your website to have or your register to have, that's another app, it's another plugin, it's another monthly cost. And they add up real quick because Shopify doesn't ever, as a platform, their goal is to never fix anything. Their goal is to have somebody else do it for them that they can charge you as the consumer for.
That's really considerate.
Yeah. For example, we use Managed Comics as our subscription management tool, and we love the guys there. Brian is great. They're so receptive. If you have a problem, they try to fix it right away. But they are not Shopify. They're a Shopify plugin. So you're paying the Managed Comics subscription, and then they just had to create what's called an order helper. I always stumble over it. Order helper tile. And that is, if you, David Harper, were a Challenger subscriber, we have a database that has all of your books in it, all your subscriptions, your special orders, all those things. And then when we update the list for the week that says, hey, here's everything that's coming out that David gets, it's in a separate little subfolder file. And then when you come in to buy it, we have to send it from Managed Comics to Shopify. That was the biggest problem for the most of 2022 because there was no mechanism in place to make it, to send it. Shopify doesn't have an app for that. They outsource it. So we were using, I forget who we were using. We were using a different app, but the problem was when it would send all the information, it stripped all the metadata out. So it would still say, sure, David is getting Hexware number 1 and Duel number 3. And yes, I'm just looking at books on the shelf as I walk by for those suggestions. But it wouldn't say, it wouldn't keep the data of what those were. It wouldn't say that, A, they were for you. It wouldn't say, here's the price. It wouldn't say, here's your discount. So it stopped being specifics and just became text. So it stripped all the data, all the discount, all the information, and it wouldn't track sales. And it wouldn't, more importantly for subscribers, wouldn't put their discounts in. And it would also add tax back into everything in periodicals, not taxed. So then we'd have to go into every single line item and change it back, which would take, like, depending on the size of the transaction, like 10 minutes to ring somebody up, which is untenable in a retail situation. So while Managed Comics was building their own tile to send all the information over, we came up with a system. Dal Bush, co-owner of Challengers, came up with a system of making every possible book just a set subscriber book. Like, instead of saying that we're transferring Human Target number 9 over, it would just be, we're sending a $4.99 DC comic over, which gets the job done, but it ruined our chance of any sales data for subscription books for the year. So this is the first year that we haven't done a top 100 single issue list or a top 100 graphic novel sales list, because those sales would just be organic off the shelf numbers, not have any subscriber numbers in. And, subscriber sales are legit half, if not more, of our yearly total. So it would be a completely inaccurate list.
I bet $4.99 DC comic did very well for you.
I think it did. I think it really did.
There were many
Yes,
of them.
for sure. For sure.
One thing I'm curious about is, so I told you I'm working on those features, one for Publishers Weekly, one for Sketch, not to spoil my own articles, but in conversations, I've talked to at least 3 shops, including yourself, who are up this year, but the vibes are bad. It doesn't feel good. And is that a time cost thing? Is that this is the environment of the direct market? Is it because the up was very top heavy and so the front half of the year was really good and the second half wasn't? What is leading to those vibes being bad in your opinion?
The first is what you said. It's time. It still to this day takes so much more work to do what we used to do when there was one distributor. And, we know that one distributor is never coming back, but doing final order cutoffs, we have to do through 3 separate companies that all have 3 separate systems. And not everybody manages the data the same way. Penguin Random House doesn't track sales for you. When you go into order, when you do your FOCs, it doesn't say, hey, last issue for Stargirl, you ordered X number of copies. You have to go dig that up per book you're trying to do your orders for. Yet Lunar shows you that. Lunar's like, hey, last issue, here's what you ordered for like the last 5 issues. So you can at least have a starting point to see like, oh, this is what where my mind was when I was doing these numbers. It doesn't track sales numbers. Diamond used to do all that for you. You just look at it and say, oh, okay, here's what I ordered and what I sold. We don't have that now. The data is different for everybody, and we don't have the sales data at hand because there is no. When I say Diamond did that, that was when we were using RMH, Retail Management Hero, and Comic Suite together, which was all Diamond proprietary software for subscription management and the register functions. So it was all tied up in one thing, and it was so much easier to have all your data in one place. Now you got to have multiple screens open and tabbing back and forth to see what you ordered, and then a different screen for what you sold, and then a different screen for the actual FOC line item ordering information that also has the information for each title. And that's just the FOC function. Like it used to take, like a good hour to go through it, but now it's and they're all on different days as well. The deadlines for final orders are different for each distributor. And if you do it too early, you're in danger of having like DC go in and add a couple new covers the day after you did it, which they shouldn't be able to do, but they can because who's going to stop them?
Well, in Penguin Random House too, I know in some situations, the way it's set up, I don't know if this is a Marvel thing or a PRH thing, but I know that there have been cases where you're having to do FOC for like, let's say number 3 of something before 2 is even out, right?
Yeah, and it used to be a 3-week window. It's way worse around the holidays because the printers shut down and they need to get things in the works and you're doing it months in advance. But now because there is nobody, because Diamond used to be like, hey, everybody, you got to give the retailers more time or, more information. No one does that now. And Marvel is the king of soliciting issues 2 and 3 when you don't have sales data for 1. Mm-hmm. I used to, like a year ago when I was doing the Lunar FOCs, I'd complain because they were doing a 4-week window. So basically, if I'm trying to get my FOC numbers on a Friday, I've had 2 days of sales for a book because it's like, oh, this book came out this week. You've had 2 days to see how it sells and then guess. Now it's worse than that. It's way longer than that. Image and Boom are the only companies that seem to, the main FOC companies that give you the actual 3-week window. So you get sales data and things like that. And that's just one aspect. For example, another time suck was yesterday, Friday, a reorder showed up from UPS and it was 18 separate boxes. If it was a Diamond order, it would have been 5. But because so many Penguin Random House books or Simon & Schuster books are shipped 1 per box, 1 per T-fold, 1 per envelope, it's just so many things you dig through. And you can have one order that has 3 books in it, and each of those books has a different purchase order in it. So you have to go into 3 separate purchase orders for 3 different books just to log your product into your system. And like literally it was 3:30 yesterday afternoon, and Gina and I had just finish the reorder, which used to be a thing that would take maybe an hour, and it was the majority of the day. And that's every week because everybody ships so randomly. I will say about Ingram, they are the fastest response as far as you place an order on a Tuesday, you get the books by Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Diamond is still within a week, but everybody else is. Lunar holds everything. Well, I mean, now they give you the option of direct shipping, but we have them hold to the next weekly shipment. But Penguin Random House takes like a week and a half to get reorders and stuff like that. And there's so many. Their invoicing is terrible. I can't believe that this is the industry standard for books, for bookstores, for other, actual publishers.
Well, and I think that, to clarify for listeners, it's like some of this stuff might not seem that bad, but when you're talking about adding, I don't even know how long, you're adding a portion of time, somewhere between, let's say, 30 seconds and 2 minutes to the FOC orders when you're having to tab back and forth. When you're having to do that times thousands of books every single year, that's a lot.
So much time.
So much time. And that's time that you could be spending hand selling out on the floor to make sure that people are finding good books. Like when somebody comes in and is like, I want the superhero book for a gift. I'm sorry, I'm like half paying attention to you, but I'm also half paying attention to getting this reorder in. And then it also...
So you get the most frustrated because you want to get the reorder in because it's important to get the product on the shelf, but you got to put it down because helping the person that's in front of you is the most important part of your job.
Right.
You could say, oh no, ordering is, or putting the books on the shelf. No, helping that person find the book they want or that they didn't know they wanted. That's the most important thing that we do. And it has to be our first goal. And I'm guilty of being frustrated and being like, oh, I want to get back to that task. I got to finish this task. The customer has to come first.
Yeah. So I said that others kind of have the bad vibes. There's just a weird air of uncertainty and unhappiness right now to the direct market in my conversations. You were up. Are you feeling that too? Or are you like happy about where you're at, even though that you wish things would change?
So I'd be happier if I could understand why things are up. If things were up because we were selling more comics, like more quantity per issue or per title, I'd be much happier. But we're up because there's so many more variant covers. We now have a standard pricing system for incentives for our shop. If it's a $3.99 book and it's a 1 in 10, $7.99. If it's a 1 in 25, $14.99. Like it's just set across the board pricing, and a lot of it comes from that. And there's like a lot of it's managed comics because people are finding and ordering not only books we wouldn't have normally stocked for the shelf, but all the variant covers for books we wouldn't shop. We don't carry books from smaller press publishers, and people are doing like, oh, I want this book, but I want covers A, B, and C, which we would never ever have carried A, B, and C of most covers because we still don't like doing all that many variants. And also, it's online sales as well. And that is honestly, without changing the topic too much, one of the things we want to focus more on in the next year is making more of we are redesigning our website, getting away from, hey, this is Challengers, this is who we are, this is information, and just making it an e-commerce site.
Yeah.
Because that's the future. So if it was, I was going to say quantifiable, but I mean qualifiable leaps and gains of like, oh, we sold more of these books, but we're selling less per title. There's just more titles. And that makes me nervous. That makes me uneasy. The fact that we can't manufacture hits is maybe the wrong way to say it, but the fact that we can't get behind a book and have it have a huge impact. Like there's a couple of great books we have on the horizon for early next year, like Kyle Starks and Peter Kowalski's Where Monsters Lie. Love it. The book is great. We're going to push the hell out of it, but this isn't like a decade ago where Six Gun is a new book and we can say, hey, Challengers love Six Gun, everyone get behind it, and it does gangbusters for us. This is a book we'll say, hey, Challengers loves Where Monsters Lie, let's get behind it. and it'll do okay. It'll be solid but not spectacular because there's just too many books and people get too distracted and they don't want to take chances, and virtually everything is a mini series, so people decide to wait. But then after they wait, do they ever come back and get the trade? Who can say? Who can tell?
So one part of that is, I mean, all of that's very interesting to me, but one part is particularly interesting to me in the sense that you would think that in a market that has way too many comics, that having someone guide them would be even more useful. Where like you could lead them to Where Monsters Lie, and they'd be like, "Thank you. I don't know what to buy because I look at this and there's like 500 books this week." Not actually 500. That is actually overstating it, which is a very rare thing to do in comics these days. Why do you think that is not as impactful as it used to be?
Oh man, I wish I knew, because that is the bane of my existence. Because I'm going to take Boom, for example. Boom has some really good books out right now, but I think because there's so many, nobody wants to take a chance on all of them. And if everybody tries one of them, it's not the success that you hope it's going to be. But if like Vicious Circle, I don't know if you took a look at that book or not, but that book is A, gorgeous, B, exceptionally well done, and C, really interesting. Unfortunately, it's also Black Label format, magazine size, so people are turned off by that right away. But that's a book that even hand selling, if we get an extra 5 or 6 people to add it to their polls, that is a huge victory today when it didn't used to be. But people don't want to, like, people will try a book, but they don't want to commit because they know that next month there's going to be even more things. And I think it's just a matter of not wanting to, not wanting to commit to things.
The sampling.
Yeah, exactly. Like we did strong pushes for Gospel and All Against All, and we have moderate success with them, but we don't have breakout successes anymore. We don't have books that people just universally love, regardless of how well we push it. And I just think that for a while I thought it was us. I'm like, I just don't think people believe in our picks anymore. But that's not the case. I just think that the industry, the readership as a whole, isn't as willing to take as many chances.
I'll be honest. So Gospel and All Against All are both books that I'm interested in. Actually, Gospel in particular was one I picked up at the shop, and I was like, the cover is great. Cover to #1, I love. It's fantastic. But I knew that both were minis, and I knew that both were ones where I was kind of like, I hadn't really heard much about. I was kind of on the fence about. And so instead of taking a risk, I was like, I'll just get the trade later. And to be fair, in my defense, as you can see behind me, I do buy the trades.
In your weekly email of what you're buying, you do say, I would buy this, but I'm a dirty, rotten trade waiter. And I know you go back and buy the trades because when the trades come out, you'll be like, I'm buying this trade this week.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it is interesting where there's that environment where you can guide people to this stuff and they still don't do it. I do get it. I find that it's like, I don't want to say that publishers are kind of cannibalizing their own books, but they kind of are. It kind of feels like that to some degree.
Yeah, it's like nobody puts the attention on a book anymore. And like we get press releases for not only every Boom book, but like every Boom cover, which is a little too far.
So it's like 1,000 emails a week?
Yeah, basically. Image does a lot of like, oh, here's a letter from the writer. Like this week we got a letter from Peter Tomasi about... I don't know, what is it? Blood Tree, Blood Wing, Blood Angel. I can't remember what it's called. Comes out next week though. And we got one just today from the writer of Almighty. But all the letters are basically, hey, please buy my book. We think it'll do well for you, which is great. But everybody thinks that about their book, And even like David, if you were a Challengers regular, you would probably get tired every week of me saying, David, you got to read this book now. This book is so great, because, you're still buying the last 2 that we recommended, and there's more that keep coming. And you're right, because everything is shorter run. No one feels the investment, I think. I don't know. I long ago realized that I can't consider myself the the average Challengers customer,
Right.
because my habits are just totally different, and I get to read a lot of stuff for free. I'll say it, I do.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Zoop is starting 2023 with a bang. In January, there'll be new campaigns launched each week from some incredible creators. Spearheaded by Paula Lore's Pink Midnight presents The Butterfly House, there are also campaigns by Craig Rasmussen, plus Waco Comics' Jeff Messer, Cam Kirkow, Doug Wood, and more. All these creators greatly appreciate your support over at zoop.gg. It takes less than 30 seconds to sign up, and the checkout is easy and intuitive. Add multiple rewards and add-ons into your cart, provide some info during checkout, and you're done. No confusing additional steps in finalizing your pledge, and no post-campaign surveys. For creators looking to crowdfund your project, Zoop are the comic book crowdfunding specialists and are currently open for submissions. Check out some case studies on their blog at blog.zoop.gg and email them at hello@wearezoop.com to start the campaign. And now, back to the show. I don't think it's the fact that it's not that you're not making the right picks or you don't make a convincing case for these books. It's just like the environment, I think. But here's a question, just to contextualize a little bit. So you said like a decade ago with the Six Gun, which is the reference I always make to you. So I'm glad that you keep using it as like the prototypical Challengers hand-sold hit. You know, at that time, what was a hit comic versus today? Like if you were like, this is a standout hit, what is that today versus then? Or does that even exist today, sales-wise?
One of the things that I miss and I don't seem to get anymore is like the comic chatter. Like people just don't talk about the books they're buying. People love to talk in the store about what
Movies.
They're watching, movies, pro wrestling, of course. And it's hard to talk about a book that you're buying that's brand new because you haven't read it. But it's not the everyday regulars, your Wednesday warriors who come back next week and say, "Oh my God, Spy Superb #1 was so great." Like they're just talking about something else. The people that do the "oh my God, this book was so great" are the people that buy the trades and come back for other volumes of trades.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
But percentage wise, a hit for us back then was about 4 times what it is now.
Whoa.
Maybe three times.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's a staggering number. And that's why books like what is a hit today is barely a hit. We were trying to answer a question 2 weeks ago, like what is our best selling female fronted comic where the female character's name is the title of the book. And it was so hard to do because regardless of quality, everything sells the same, whether it's Harley Quinn or Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel. They're all a few copies over subscribers on the shelf. And the answer wound up being She-Hulk. She-Hulk is our
That was my guess.
Yeah, that's a good guess, and by far. But for every, like the diversity of characters and creators is not represented in our sales, and that's almost sad as well. Like I love Kelly Thompson. Everything she does is so much fun. Captain Marvel, a handful of people read it who aren't subscribing to it. And obviously subscriber numbers and subscriber sales count as sales, but we always look at the organic sales as more of an indicator of how a book is doing. But unfortunately, subscription copies count for, I want to say like 80% of almost every title that we sell.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very vague and broad generalization because it's obviously different. But
how far has the shelf movement changed over that span too? Like, is that down significantly?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Very much so.
And so for listeners that don't know, I just mean that like Challenger sells comics to their pull list customers. And as of now, it makes up 80%, roughly speaking, of their total sales for comics. And shelf ones are like, the ones you just go and pick up yourself, ones that aren't in your pull box, which it used to be a big part of the business I think.
Yeah. Ideally,
the reason why everyone pull list customers are the dominant force now is because you've convinced everyone to do that. I don't know if that's the case, but like, what is it now? Like compared to like shelf sales versus what it was before?
Books like Something is Killing the Children or Stillwater, books that are good club sales for us, maybe 1 or 2 for the shelf.
They're long in the tooth, though, for 2023. I mean, like, Stillwater 17
Fair.
issues deep. That's like 1 million back in the day.
Stillwater, we have one for the shelf on New Comic Book Day, and it's got a very not very. It's got a healthy number of subscribers. It's one of the books that I always thought should have done better.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a different kind of book for a lot of people. Same thing with Public Domain, which I think is great, and I'm so happy we get to read it on Substack first because it's easier to pitch. But that's a book where our subscriber numbers are significantly lower, and I think our shelf copies do more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not across the board, but yeah, definitely. We used to have a rule at Challengers that if we're not ordering 5 copies of a book for the shelf, don't even order it.
Oops.
If that were the rule now, there's so many books we wouldn't order.
That's crazy.
Because there's so many books that just sell like 2 or 3 copies, but at the same time, you're like, I don't want to waste the shelf space. I don't want to like have the extra hassle of checking in and putting out a couple of books. But we've got dedicated people who want to come in and just buy that book off the shelf every month. And if we know it's going to sell, why would we not stock it?
Well, and here's the thing is like, I'm sure some people are listening are like, well, why aren't you just ordering more in case somebody would come in? But the problem with that is A, you know that they won't. And B, if you ordered like, let's say 50 copies of random Sumerian comic number 3 or whatever, it's not like a Field of Dreams mentality would come true where it's like, if you build it, they will come. You'd probably just be stuck with 50 comics that don't sell. Sorry, Sumerian.
And then there's always the, like, oh man, like we sold an extra 2 of this book randomly last month. Let's order 2 more. Then it doesn't happen. Or you realize like, oh no, some people from out of town were in and they bought some stuff. So you can't look at that as regular monthly sales moving forward.
So if I asked you, like, what's moving, like, what is actually like a successful book for you? In the past, I feel like you would immediately have a bunch of examples. Do you feel like those come to mind as quickly? What's a winner for you this year?
Saga.
It's always Saga.
Human Target did really well for us because that book is gorgeous.
People really like Human Target.
Yeah. I mean, Nice House on the Lake, but that wasn't necessarily last year specifically. 8 Billion Genies, Do a Powerbomb. We did a variant cover for both of those, which we almost never do anymore. We did a Curse Words van tour variant for 8 Billion Genies #1 with a bunch of other stores that did the Curse Words van tour when that book was a thing. But also, Ryan Brown is local, we had a signing. Daniel Warren Johnson is local, we had a signing. So that always helps.
I think those were generally hits too. That probably helped too.
Yeah. But I mean, those are also like generally very good books that we can get behind. Man, nothing else leaps out as a like an A level hit. There's a lot of B and C level hits. For as much as we love All Against All and ordered, there was a point where any Image #1 was like a minimum of 50 copies for us. Now 50 copies for us of an Image #1 is like, oh, Jeff Lemire is writing it.
Right.
And even that sometimes is like, nope, that doesn't do it. You know what? I Hate This Place was it did well for us. I think it helped that there were the 2 covers.
Didn't Kyle do a signing too?
Kyle, he did it for 6 Sidekicks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he wasn't in town for this. Without saying what, I can tell you that Kyle and Chris Schweizer will be back at Challengers in 2023.
That's exciting.
In the first half of the year. And I assume they'll both be around for C2E2. The C2E2 this year falls on our 15th anniversary.
Oh, you're going to have a party?
And we are going to have a party. We only do parties now on the 5s. Like we did a party for, years 1 through 5. Then we took a break and did a fancy one at 10 with tuxedos and whatnot. We're doing one for 15. It's going to be the Friday night of C2E2, and we're going to try to get as many of our creator friends who are in town to come by. The only problem is we are not very close to McCormick Place, which is where C2E2 is held, and it is a trek to get to the store. Even though we are still in Chicago, we're just north. We're there downtown. So we'll see who can make it.
They'll do it for you.
And another problem is we don't know who's going to be at C2E2 because there's no guest list yet, really.
Oh, who wants to know the guests of a con?
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to know how many voice actors are going to be there? A lot. All those talents are up on the site.
I'm very sad that I'm not going to be at Emerald City this year because they 2 Emerald Cities ago, I recorded a podcast with my friend where we talked about the movie Scream because we both love Scream, and the entire cast of
Sure.
Scream is going to be at Emerald City this year, which is so random, but whatever. What are you going to do?
We have at C2E2 we have the cast of both Boy Meets World and Girl Meets World
Oh,
doing events all weekend.
very exciting.
So all those people are confirmed,
Yep.
and all the voice actors are confirmed.
Comic creators, who knows?
Dan Mora, that's the only one I know that they've announced. So actually, I think Dal told me they announced a couple more yesterday, but I haven't seen who they are yet.
That's a pretty fun one, though. Dan Moore is good. But
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I do want to ask about, obviously 2022 brought a lot of economic uncertainty, inflation, all those things like that. I've talked to some shops where because of that, they've seen customers just like wholesale, like cull their pull lists. They've dropped a lot of books. They've dropped all of their books, things like that. Is that something you're seeing?
We have more subscribers than ever before. One of the weird things about that is because people sign up via Managed Comics by themselves.
You never see them?
We don't know who they are. It's not us handing them a sell sheet and pitching them on the club and like interacting with them and like, hey, what's your name? And seeing their immediate list of what they like. Now people come in, they're like, yeah, I want to pick up my subscription. And I'm like, who are you? Because you signed up online. I don't know who you are. We never had that onboarding experience, which is important to make visual connections with people. So you could be like, oh, hey, David, here are your books, that kind of a thing.
Right.
So we do have more subscribers than ever before. Most of the new subscribers are very light on their lists, just a handful of books. And also Managed Comics lets people, there's subscriptions and pre-orders. Pre-orders are for a single item, where if you want like just a variant cover, that's a pre-order, that's not a subscription. Subscriptions are saying, I want the A cover to Amazing Spider-Man every month. Pre-orders can be, I want the B cover to X-Men for issue 14, but I want the C cover for issue 15, and I don't want anything for issue 16.
Or I want John and the Impossible Monsters number 12 because every shop I've been to in the last month thinks it's actually not a real book.
It is a real book, and it is in my hold box with your name on it.
I didn't know that was still the case. I'm ordering it after this podcast because I want that comic.
Yeah, we were savoring it because of the other thing you were looking at, which you got, which is great.
Yes, that's the Love and Rockets first 40 collection or whatever.
Yep.
The first 50, the big box set. But I do think it's interesting. So Eitan Manhoff from Cape and Cowl Comics told me,
yeah, one of the best logos of comic stores.
Oh, incredible. Incredible. It's so good. But the funny thing about it is he told me that one of his, I don't want to say one of his biggest, but a big customer of his only does ordering through their e-commerce site. And he's never met him. He could walk into the store and he wouldn't even know him. And he just finds it to be completely mystifying. He's like, I love this customer. I have no idea who they are. And they're a local person, I believe. And so that's one of the funny things is like you can have these customers that have no relationship with you. It's just like you're their shop, despite the fact that they're basically like a stranger to you, which kind of falls in the face of the entirety of the comic shop experience. Or flies in the face.
Right. Like you think like you want someone wants to shop at your store because of the rapport, the bond, the personality, the recommendations or whatever. I mean, thankfully we have a fair number of mail order subscribers who found us via our podcast Contest of Challengers and who want to support us for that, which I find amazing. And I love the fact that people will still quote unquote shop local when they're across the country, when there's so many deep discount sites that are available, but the fact that they still consider us their store, even though they live in, LA or Colorado or where have you. And to me, that's the testament of what a comic shop does, is it creates that bond. And even if it's just one-sided because you listen to us every week, but you still feel like you're part of the store.
Yeah.
And like there's we did just lose a big subscriber. And by lose, I mean, they just ghosted us, which happens all the time. But basically, like most stores, we ask people to come in once a month. After about 6 weeks, if we haven't seen them, we'll call, and then we'll give them a week, then we'll email, then they'll give them a week, and then the stuff goes back out. And this was somebody who just stopped coming in. Like, I know they had health problems, and that could have been an issue, but we also, every time we email somebody to say, hey, your books are still here, or they're piling up, we also say, we can send you an invoice. We don't mind holding the books once you pay for them. That's fine. But we can't let unsold products sit in boxes for months, because by the time we pull the trigger and put them back out,
they'll never sell.
The demand on those books, yeah, exactly. We just had somebody ghost us with that very same Love and Rockets hardcover collection that you're talking about. Somebody who pre-ordered it, and because they were a regular who bought a lot of stuff, we didn't take a deposit, which, that's on us. But we don't like taking deposits. We don't like taking deposits because we don't want to have spent that money 2 months before the book comes out and then still have to pay for it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like we prefer to prepay all of our bills whenever possible. We don't want to have to get product, sell it to make the money to pay for that product. That defeats the point of even having it in the first place.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. But yeah, we don't take deposits. From strangers, we will. But for the guy who's been subscribing to us for years, yeah. And then, they stop answering your emails, yet you still see them interacting on Instagram daily. So they're alive.
That's good. That's good.
They're moving to Los Angeles later this month, and they just got a brand new Chicago tattoo because they're going to miss the city. But
This seems very specific.
Definitely don't feel the need to buy their.
Okay, so we talked about what worked or what's working. On the flip side, what isn't working? Is it more just like that global competition? There's so many books, and so it's like none of them are big hits type of thing. It's really the issue, or are there like specific ones where you're like, this book just didn't move?
I think that there's just companies that shouldn't have started and gone as big as they have, and I don't want to make anybody feel bad by naming names or anything, but I think that this is a bad time to launch your comic book universe. I think it's a bad time to be like, hey, we've got like 5 or 6 titles coming out. I will say, like, and this is like, I wasn't even thinking of them when I thought of it, but Frank Miller Presents has done nothing for us. No one cared. Like, Ronin, which came out when I had just finished my freshman year of high school, never needed a sequel. I'm trying to find it on the shelf now as well and see how we're doing on it.
I'm not going to say how old I was when that came out.
Please don't. Okay, so it's still here on the shelf, and we definitely ordered pretty low on that. And then for their second book, I can't remember what it's called. Beautiful Creatures? No, that's something else. It's in the early part of the alphabet. We only ordered 5 copies, and I'm trying to figure out where it is.
It's sold out. That's why you can't find it.
Well, there'd be a card that would say, like, we've got...
The Frank Miller Presents thing is odd because it's like everyone talked about it as a big deal, and like Frank Miller is a big deal in the grand scheme of comics, but in terms of the 2023 market, I don't see why anybody would expect Ronin 2 coming out 40 years after the first issue arrived to be a big hit. And so that makes sense.
It does, but I don't know. I thought there'd be some sort of
interest.
I
want to ask you about, I sent you a tweet from Bruno Batiste, well, from Big Bang Comics, yes. But it was Bruno tweeting, and he said, there's been some very interesting conversations happening behind the scenes within retailers. Seems like everyone is experiencing the exact same problems with single issue comics this last year, and publishers are completely deaf to all complaints retailers keep presenting. What's your take on that? Is that a universal with you too? Because I know that you agreed with what Bruno said on the podcast about there being too many books without markets.
When he was on your podcast a few weeks ago, I messaged him right after I listened to it and said, hey, man, I thought that was me talking because you were saying everything that was in my head.
Yeah.
And he's definitely right. Like looking at, I'm sure you saw the Comic-Con list of how many individual books came out in the last, X number of years. However, it doesn't include variant covers, which variant covers count as extra spaces on the shelves, especially when things are new for the week.
He did have a chart for variants also in there, but yeah, it was separate.
Oh, I didn't see the separate chart. Dang.
It's also in my variants article I just wrote in December.
Well, your variant article was amazing with statistics. And there's statistics you put in that article that I quote often about how it means that every comic has
3.55.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so crazy. 3.5 variants on average for every comic.
Staggering number.
Yeah.
But no, like yes, one of the things that retailers are finding as a whole is that now that there's so many distributors and publishers, and while there's all these Facebook groups and places where oh, look, I found Pandora. I wasn't looking for that one, but
I don't even know what that is. Are you talking about the planet from Avatar?
Yeah, no. Frank Miller Presents Frank Miller's Pandora. The full name of the book, Frank Miller Presents Frank Miller's Pandora.
Patrick, you've said like 5 comics during this podcast that I literally I didn't even know existed before. You like willed them into existence.
That's only fair because sometimes I am jealous of your specific graphic novel knowledge, and you'll be talking about books. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. We got to get this book. And I desperately want to, I haven't asked Dallas yet, but I want to print out your year-end awards for graphic novels and just use those as selling blurbs for all of the books that you mentioned.
Do it.
Yeah, because I think that you such a wide variety of good books, and some things are under people's radars, and definitely some are under mine. But to get back to Bruno, the guy's a genius. He knows what's up. There's more, in theory, there's more places to talk to people, but there's no one to talk to. There's no response from anywhere. If you have a Marvel complaint, there's nowhere to go with it. You can send it to your PRH rep, but they can't do anything about it because they're not Marvel, and they can just pass it along. There is a Marvel Facebook group, but A, it's hard to get into, and B, it's just mainly so David Gabriel can post new variant covers that are coming out and then turn off comments immediately, so there's no discussion for anything. There is no the direct sales team. Like, we used to get phone calls from our DC sales reps every single week. And admittedly, when systems became more automated and we would just do inventory generated lists for what we wanted to reorder, it became less useful to read a list to your salesperson over the phone when you can just upload numbers to a site. But it was still good to have that connection and still have a face to go with it. And now I've been doing this a long time, and I know less people at all publishers than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I do know someone well and I have a question, and I can email them and say, hey, what about this specific question that was raised by a customer about this individual book? They can only come back with the company line and just be like, oh, supply chain issues. When in reality, we know that's not the case because of other things that have come out for some companies that may be having some financial issues. Without going into any detail, of course.
I mean, to be honest, like, the financial issues thing is pretty broad. It's hard to be specific about that. You wouldn't be able to guess from that because there's several right now. But I do think it's interesting that in a time where we have more ways to communicate with these variant entities, it's actually harder to communicate with them than ever before.
Yes, and I think that's one of Bruno's main points. That's one of the things he was getting at, is that we have literally no recourse when there's issues. And I think Comics Pro, the comics professional retailer organization group of a couple hundred retailers that band together to try to have an active singular voice in the industry. The annual meeting is coming up in Pittsburgh in the end of February. And I think that it's going to be very interesting because there's a strong push to get a lot of publishers there. But publishers don't like going to these events because oftentimes they're on the defensive and they don't want to have to spend a weekend. A, it's people that really can't make any changes. It's just like mouthpieces and whatnot. And B, they're just going to have to be taking shit from retailers the whole time. and it's hard to make it feel constructive. So, but outside of organizations like a Comics Pro, of which there really aren't any others, what do you do? Like, at least at Comics Pro, you can say, "Hey, board, here's a problem facing everybody. What can we as a unit do about it?" And then President Jen Haynes can open a dialogue with that publisher and say, "Hey, here's the problems we're having." But that's only if the publishers are willing to listen, if they're willing to sit down and to try to talk about it, or actually pay it attention, as opposed to just say, "Okay, we hear you," and then do nothing.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. It's Bad Idea, and the Renegade comic book publisher is back doing their crazy antics. The latest includes putting a comic from Mark Waid and David Lapham, The First Supper, into a recent edition of Previews for Order completely randomly. Or it was the latest, until Bad Idea also snuck a new comic from Joshua Dysart and Kano, The First 7 Days, into the same edition of Previews. Don't worry if you missed it, because you probably should have, as it was hidden under the publisher named B-Side Press with fake creator names. That's how Bad Idea rolls, though, making notable comics with great creators in extraordinarily unusual ways. Keep your eye out for whatever's next with Bad Idea, if you can. And now, back to the show.
A lot of these issues might be matters of perspective, because it's like too many variants, too many limited series. Are those really problems for, like, I don't know, Marvel or like DC or whomever? Because they're the ones doing it. They're the ones who are deciding to do that. And so I don't know if they would even agree that that's a problem, even though you were the one who's selling them.
They see the sales numbers, so they know if it's worth doing or not.
Right.
That's always been I don't know David Gabriel very well at all, but other retailers that I've talked to have said that he's very savvy with Marvel numbers. He knows what sells and what doesn't, and he's already made decisions on books before the books are even out, because most of the time his expectations wind up being accurate. So when someone's saying, like, "Oh, you need to do this because it'll help my store," in his head, he could be like, "No, I've seen the numbers. It doesn't matter. Doing that wouldn't do anything for us."
Right.
And those are like, sometimes I wish they would just talk to us like that and just say, "Yeah, you complain about all these variant covers, but look how many we sell. Like, if you really hated them, why would you buy them?"
That's the problem. I mean, I've had multiple retailers over the years tell me that publishers wouldn't do variants if they didn't sell. And that's the problem. Yeah. There's like, it's interesting that it's become this like self-fulfilling prophecy where you can't really argue against it, but everyone kind of agrees that it isn't really working at shops to the same degree, that at least in a sense that would support this. And that's the problem.
So we have a spotlight section in our store that changes every month. And for the month of January, I said, why don't we pull a lot of our incentive and ratio variants off of the shelf and just put them in one spot so people can find them. And this is terrible for audio, but this is the shelf. Oh, hold on. How it looks so far.
Mm-hmm.
And all that is DC up through J.
So it's 15 variants up on it, or at least I could see 15 variants just on display. So you're just putting them out there to make sure that people see them so they can sell.
It's 18 spots, and each spot is a different title. So it's like, oh, okay, so this is the Batman pile, this is the Detective pile, this is the Danger Street pile, this is the Dark Crisis pile. But we only had, like, after 18, we're only up to J for DC, and that's a lot. I thought we would have a lot more variety represented. And yeah, we're the ones who ordered these, but we like, if we never reach for a variant, but if we qualify, it's like, all right, fine, we'll order that one. But I think you'll find that a lot of retailers are saying that there's just no traction on a lot of the like the 1 in 25 DCs almost across the board, unless somebody says, "Oh my God, this one artist is hot this month." It's just not a regular thing. Like, nobody is in for, like, "Oh, I want every 1 in 25 Danger Street cover that they do for every issue."
Right.
No, it's not a thing.
The one that really got me was Marvel announced that they were doing no prize variants, which I thought was hilarious, because don't get me wrong, I think no prizes are amazing, but I've never been like, you know what? I wish my cover for this comic looked like that. I wish I could get Amazing Spider-Man that had a no prize thing, especially because and I hate to say it, but this is kind of like Marvel underlining knowing who its audience is. No prizes have not really been relevant since like the 80s.
Nope.
But
Nope.
that's that's an entirely different story. I do want to emphasize, I would say that the tenor of this conversation has largely been negative. But the funny thing is, and listeners who have heard other podcasts with Patrick's one of the most positive retailers out of anybody I talk to. I can't even imagine being on one of those forums right now. It must be just like screaming bloody murder constantly.
I mean, I try not to go on them because they are actively depressing.
Yeah.
I would hope that it's less negative and just more expressing frustration. I hope that that's what we're getting across more.
So I have a couple patron questions, both from the same person, Scott Hazelwood. And Scott Hazelwood has a question that might make you laugh because if it ties into what we were talking about, like, the conversational element between retailers and publishers. How could publishers help retailers more?
Well, number one, more PDFs of books before we get them. Number two, and this is a thing that everybody says, give us all the covers when you announce a book. I hate the slow rollout. I hate the FOC covers. I hate the number of people that will say to us like, I know I signed up for cover A, but can I get this cover instead? Which, fine, but there's so much stupid behind the scenes adjusting. I can't just ring this one up. I have to take this one off of their account, then put it back into active sales on the shelf before it even actually physically goes on the shelf, just to ring them up with a different cover. And people just want the choices earlier. And I never even used to care about, we don't have all the covers up front. I don't care. Just buy the A cover. Man, people don't necessarily want the A cover.
You want to know a fun fact about my poll list?
Yeah, only A covers.
Only A covers. Same.
So a quick little side note here. We've had on our podcast a couple of times in the last year a newer comic reader, a woman who in her real life is in marketing for as a book publicist. They do a lot of publicity for actual novelists and things. And she got into comics over the pandemic, and she engages in comics the exact opposite way that I do. And she's also half my age.
Oh, is this the variant one?
Yes.
Yes, you told me about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I am desperately trying to learn from her what comic engagement for someone like that is. And after knowing her for a couple of months and having her on the podcast a couple of times and hanging out with her a couple of times, I'm no closer to understanding.
So her thing is that she's really into variants and you're not. That's kind of like where the gap lies, right?
Yeah, but the difference is not even for books that she reads. Like she's she's a big Scarlet Witch fan, so she'll get all the covers that she thinks are good-looking covers. Not every single cover, but she wants, like 4 of the covers.
So like Russell Dowderman, no doubt.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Dowderman.
Of course, but also
boss.
Eleni Casagrande and the Tau cover. Those were ones that she'd wanted this week. But she's not above seeing a cover from a book she doesn't read and having it be like, oh, it's like a $20 variant cover, and saying, well, I want to have that because I like that cover a lot. And then not engaging with the book itself just for the cover.
I would feel very strange about that.
Yeah, so do I. But
everyone's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not that her way of collecting is any less valid, but it's impossible as a retailer to market to that when that person themselves is in marketing and should understand.
Yeah.
It's very difficult and also they make their decisions very last second. It's like, I had to make these decisions 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So if we don't have a thing you want, it's because you didn't know you wanted it. And then in this marketplace, I can't predict or speculate or take this is what I mean to say. I can't take the financial risk that you might want this. It's what you were saying a while ago about just order 50 extra copies. Someone will buy it, something like that. Like you can't take those risks because there's too many other places for your comic buying dollar to go.
Patrick, just order 50 of everything.
I should, but then it's not enough if it's human target, and we're not selling enough.
Well, then you also wouldn't be currently in business, which would be a different problem.
Definitely would not. Definitely would not. No, I mean, have open lines of communication. Here's one of the biggest things that I don't think a lot of creators and publishers do. Tell us who your book is for. Have a concise elevator pitch, and I mean, give me 1 or 2 sentences that I can use to sell a book. Give me the dreaded, it's this meets this, because that works more than anything else, even though no one likes to be pigeonholed. I get it. But give me the this meets this. Take Saga out of any of those recommendations. You can never use Saga as your,
it's banned.
As your guide pole. Yeah. But tell me who it's for. Tell me, you can say, oh, it's for fans of X-Men, but also say it's for fans of Breaking Bad. Give me other media that I could tell that I can compare this to. Don't just have your creator say, hey, we worked really hard. This is a good book. We think it'll do well for you. For who? Who's this for?
You know what's funny?
What's that?
Every single time I come up with a fake elevator pitch, for some reason I use as one of the 2 Anaconda. I don't know why. I haven't even seen Anaconda in like 25 years, but for some reason I'm always like, oh, it's like the Iron Giant meets Anaconda. I'm like, what would that even be?
Don't you have to say Anaconda?
Why would I say it like that?
That's how they did it in all the trailers and things, didn't they?
Oh, I don't remember. I just remember it was a movie that had Jennifer Lopez and a giant snake.
Yeah. Yeah, they whispered the movie title. Oops.
But I mean, I think it all kind of comes back to what you want. And you said this yourself to some degree. What you really want is more communication, more consistently, and more timely.
You can say, this book is great. I loved it. It made me cry. Tell me who's it for?
Right.
Like, I can only do so much of that, you know?
Well, it makes your job easier because if somebody is like, oh, I'm looking for something that, has like it's a crime story, or I'm looking for like a crime story that has like this vibe, and you're like, oh, okay, well then I can take you to Brubaker and Phillips. I'm just going to say Reckless because
I want an animated giant robot that fights really big snakes in the sewers.
Do I have the book for you? It's called God, I can't even come up with. All I just want to say is Anaconda again. It is
Anaconda Giant.
Anaconda Giant. We got to do better than that. I'm gonna come up with a name for it, and then we're gonna have that be the title of this episode. But okay, the next question Scott had was, amongst all of this, is that this isn't him saying, this is me talking, but single issues seem to be kind of the trouble area in a general sense. So his question is, What's your take on the long prophesied slow extinction of the single issue and what it would mean for your shop? I mean, obviously it'd be bad.
It would, but it wouldn't be the death of comics or the death of... First of all, single issues will never die. There's too many young creators who are doing single issues, who are just getting into it, who are making their own. It maybe going the way of vinyl. Vinyl's huge now, but it took a dive for a while. But people love it, and they love the nostalgia of it. And there's a reason that comics have resisted all of the different format changes that music went through, from 8 tracks to vinyl to cassette tapes to CDs to mini discs to MP3s to now streaming. There's a reason comics have resisted all of comics just went from comics to digital. That's the only jump in between.
That was very generous of you to include mini discs, by the way.
Oh yeah, thank you. I mean, there was a 2-year period where those were a thing, man.
I have a mini disc player somewhere in this room, and I have one mini disc filled with stuff, and it is an amazingly eclectic mix of music. But anyways, sorry, prophesied extinction.
So there's a reason that comics have survived all that time, and they're so much more portable, and it's, for as much as comics is a visual medium, it's also a tactile medium. And while that may be less and less the case each year as more young readers get into reading and experience everything just digitally, there's still nothing like rolling up a comic and putting it in your back pocket, which is sacrilege to a lot of people, I understand. But the physicality of a comic is hard to replace. I don't think single issues will ever go away, but I think we're at a point where there's bound to be less of them, because there has to be. There's not enough trees in the world at this rate to keep making as many comics as there are coming out. I think that Challengers could 100% survive as a graphic novel only store. I think that it would make our weekly sales totals vastly different. But I also think that the majority of the single issue readership would adapt rather than go away. I think there'd be, maybe 10% of the readers that'd be like, well, I'm out. But I think everybody, because I don't know of any regular comic reader who just reads single issues and who doesn't read graphic novels or buy graphic novels in some capacity. And to make another Brubaker Phillips reference, those guys have proved that if you just do graphic novels, you can still sell a ton of those.
So that brings up a thing that I think is always left out of this conversation in terms of like what would happen to comic shops. The thing is at least in part the reason why single issues maintain like the, theoretically dominant side in the direct market is because you have a choice between the two. But assuming that all of them would go away if one of the formats went away, I think is maybe a little foolhardy. I don't know if that's necessarily correct because, if single issues went away tomorrow and all of a sudden I had to buy like, I don't know, the next arc of I Hate This Place as a trade instead of 5 single issues, I would still buy I Hate This Place Volume 2 if that's how it was. And I think a lot of customers would.
I think so too. I think that maybe I'm overlooking a component that would just say, fine, I'll just get everything digitally. But I don't know how many people that would still be. I mean, I know there's a good portion of our subscriber base that subscribes to physical copies, but also enjoys Marvel Unlimited and whatever the DC one is called, because it lets them read books that they would never want to actually pay for.
Right.
I don't want to go back and buy the Peter David Todd Knock run of Young Justice, even though I did when it came out. But if I could read those, sure, on an app, yeah, why not?
Isn't it funny how like that's perceived as not buying, even though it costs money? That's a real thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're buying the privilege of being able to read it as opposed to buying the book itself.
Yeah.
Like I'm an Apple Music person, and I still will outright buy vinyl. I don't do CDs anymore, but I'll still buy vinyl of things I like, or I'll just outright pay to own the digital files of bands that I love just to support them in some capacity. But there's a lot of bands that I listen to that I just stream from Apple Music that I don't consider like, I don't own that. I just listen to them. And it's the same end result. I still get to hear the music whenever I want. It's just a matter of personal ownership.
I got a CD for Christmas.
Ooh.
Yeah. First CD I've gotten in a while. Actually, that's not true. I got one like 5 months ago. I've gotten 2 CDs. Well, in the last year, I've gotten 2 CDs. But I do, you participated in that, or participated. I guess you were like kind of the only source in that one. There was the Popverse article about the DC Universe Infinite Ultra, I think it is, whatever.
Yeah.
Bunch of words there that Popverse did with Dave Busing writing it. And you talked about how, like, I think you pretty much said that, like, you don't really think it's a big deal right now. I think that there was always the concern that digital would completely cannibalize the audience, but I think that fear has been unwarranted. And I don't know if that would be the case for even if it was month or day and date. I don't know if that would be the case because a lot of people just like reading physical things.
Yeah. And there's still part of it is the ritual of going to the comic store. Maybe not. I was talking to Dal yesterday. I'm like, if you didn't work in comics and you had an office job, would you still go to your comic shop every week to get your comics? And when, like if you worked a 9-to-5 job, would you go Wednesday nights or would you go on a weekend or would you just pick once a month? Like, because going to the comic shop was a weekly ritual for me before I started working in the industry. And I think that I probably wouldn't go every week. I'll tell you that. I probably wouldn't go every week, but I would definitely go a couple of times a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went comic shopping in Chicago with Haley just last week at different stores I hadn't been to in a while, just to pop in and say hi and see what, always looking to see what people are doing and what's working for other people and just talking about just like what we're doing now, taking the temperature of the industry from other retailers.
Do you buy anything when you go?
I tried to. I didn't because she bought a ton of stuff and I felt like we were covering that base okay. So yeah.
I like that you described going in on Wednesdays as a ritual. It kind of makes me feel like I should wear a cloak when I go in or something.
I mean, sure, your rituals sound a lot more clandestine and nefarious than mine, I guess.
Hey, you know what? Rituals have all types, but for some reason in my head, it's more of a dark term. This is an interesting thing. It's a little less quantitative than I normally get. So apologies for getting very feelsy on you, Patrick. But I do think that one thing that struck me of late, and maybe it's just because I've had a lot going on and it's been the holidays and it can be an overwhelming time and everything like that. But more than I can remember pretty much in like my adult life, as a reader of comics, I've kind of been like, haven't been feeling the energy enthusiasm about single issues lately. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's the product. I don't know if it's me. I don't know what it is, but it's just kind of interesting that like this week it was Wednesday and I had a lot going on. And normally I would be like, I'm going to make it happen. I'm just going to go. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go to my shop on Wednesday. That feels meaningful, but also I don't know what it means.
It means that you are a normal person with life that gets in the way sometimes, and you can't be excited for everything every single week.
How dare you, Patrick?
I know, right? If there's one thing I want to convey to people listening, especially because this may have sounded a little bit bleak, comics are still the best thing ever, man.
Yeah.
And there are still so many comics coming out that get me excited, or things that I didn't even know were coming out that completely blow me away. And that's why I do this. And sorry, I'm fixing an entire Marvelverse shelf, which is why you got a giant close-up of my face. That's why the frustrations of running the business that keep me from enjoying comics as much as I want to personally, but I can't let that keep you from enjoying the books. And I need to better show how much comics mean to me to the people that are in the store. Because again, they don't need to know the frustrations or how annoyed we are.
That you have to check stuff in and everything.
Yeah. We started doing some very dumb Instagram videos every Tuesday night once all the books for the new week are on the wall, where Dow, Molly Jane, and I, in different configurations of 2, will hype some of the books coming out for the week. Unfortunately, sometimes we haven't read them, so we can't do a really good pitch, especially the Diamond stuff we just get in that day. Like Mosley came out last week, and I didn't get to read it until late Tuesday night. I'm like, I really enjoyed this. Man, I wish I could have told people how much I liked it earlier, because those stupid little videos actually work, and people come and say, hey, I'm buying this because you recommended it, kind of a thing. That's the conversational aspect I was saying I missed before. It actually is there on social media.
That's Rob Guillory and Sam Lofty's Mosley, which I think is really funny. It constantly, whenever I look up that title, it always wants to autocorrect and says that I've spelled Mosley wrong because it's Mosley instead of Ley. I
do that every time. I had to go back and edit a lot of the new release stuff I posted because I was typing from memory and not looking at it, and I spelled it wrong every time.
If you ever need a guest for that Tuesday thing and you want to do an Instagram Live, I would join you and be very excited about comics that are still to come.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We'll do that for sure. Wait, hold on though. So for you, it would be like 2:30 in the afternoon.
Oh, I can do whatever I want.
Okay. That's
yeah.
Fair.
The thing that I think is really interesting, and I sent you my article, The Two Sides of Comics, that I wrote about this week.
Yes.
And the thing about
listener, David gave me homework for this.
Honestly, I almost never send. I never send guests things to read ahead of time. But I sent you 3 things, and in that article, I wrote about how, in a very true sense, I feel like while the business itself is having a lot of struggles, the medium is going incredibly well. I think my God, for sure. I mean, my top 20 list this year had 5 autobio books on it that were unbelievable. And I'm not somebody who normally reads autobio comics. And yet I'm losing my mind over like Keeler Roberts. And obviously I'm going to lose my mind about Kate Beaton because Kate Beaton is the best in the business. But I mean, like
Yeah.
there's all these, I mean, Zoe Thorogood's It's Lonely
Zoe
at this.
Thorogood. Yeah, yeah. And if you would have asked me last year, you did, like this point of last year, what am I most excited for? None of those books would have been on that radar because I didn't really know of them.
You didn't know they existed. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I'm like, oh, Zoe Thorogood. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really excited for Rain. You know, like
That's the name of a book Zoe Thorogood worked on, by the way. Joe Hill's Reign, as it's officially solicited as.
exactly, and she references it frequently throughout Loneliness Set of the World. I mean, that kind of autobio meta-ness of it all.
Yeah.
Is great. But yeah, so I mean, there's the best part of comic books is discovering things you didn't know that can change your life. And on our podcast and on this podcast, we're going a little deep in the weeds with the insider baseball part of it, and that's the frustration part. But as you just said, the medium of it is what makes us do this. That's why we put up with it. That's why we trudge through the slodge of, is that a word? It is now.
It is now. People get it.
Of the paperwork and of all the computer nonsense to be able to put books in people's hands. Do I miss the days when people were buying stuff, like just money was being put into a cigar box and you didn't have pulls lists or whatever? Like there's been plenty of times over the last 15 years where Dell said, what if we got rid of the subscription service? Like that's doing a disservice to people. And then there was literally a point, I don't know, 5 years in, he's like, what if we just stopped carrying single issue comics? So those are topics we overlook, or we bring up all the time, or no, occasionally. What am I trying to say? It's always worth it. That's what I'm trying to say. Also, what do you think about Scales of Steel?
I have literally no idea what that is.
That is the name to our comic book, David. Anaconda meets Iron Giant.
Oh, there we go.
Scales of Steel.
I like it.
That wasn't me.
I like it. Scales of Steel.
That was Sam's idea.
Good job. That's gonna be the name of the episode.
I gave her I passed her this note. I'm like, hey, get me a title for this.
Scales of Steel is the name of this episode. I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, I love doing my end of the year read because it's like a lot of times when it's like you have the constant churn of Wednesday, you don't get a chance to like discover those things that are not part of that rhythm. Like I loved Sarah Alfagi and Nadia Shamas's Squire. Like that's an amazing book. I had that book in March and I didn't read it until November. And then I read it and I was like, I am an idiot. Why didn't I read this like 9 months ago?
And then I read your list at the end of the year. I'm like, well, that sounds amazing. And then looked, oh no, we have it. It's on our shelf. So I've had it this whole time as well.
There you go. Well, to be fair, you're trying to sell yours. I am not in the market for selling mine. But you hit the nail on the head when you said a lot of the cool things about comics comes from like the surprises and the things that come out of nowhere. Like Public Domain. You think I would have ever expected Chip to do a book like that? Especially while he's writing Batman and Daredevil? No, I did not. And I love that book. But anyways, you mentioned it already. I have to finish with my question that I always close with. Is there anything you're particularly excited for as we head into 2023 or anything you're hopeful for as you navigate the current time in comics?
This is a cop-out answer, but I'm excited for the things I don't know that exist yet.
That's fair.
But in the short term, I'm excited for everybody else to get to read Where Monsters Lie because it's so much fun. I really enjoyed Tim Seeley and Tony Fleek's Local Man #1. That is a book that we'll be able to do some good groundwork with. I hope. I'm excited that we're going to turn 15 at the end of March and still be here. I'm excited to meet new creators that I don't know about. And I think that one of the things we did well in our first couple years is to establish good relationships with Chicago creators. But as we get older as a store and as we get older as people, it's harder to meet the young crop of artists. And I'll talk to Chris Eliopoulos, the second one, not the not the letterer and the cartoonist. There's a Chicago-based illustration teacher and cartoonist named Chris Eliopoulos who runs the Columbia illustration department. And I try to find like, hey, who excites you? Who's going to be doing some work? And there's people that we've found and we reached out to, like, your work is stellar. This is going to be great. Who then choose not to go into comics. There's people that, like, Instagram is so great at exposing you to people that you've never seen before. There's there's a artist named Giorgio Brooks who last year did a bunch of portrait commissions for challengers that we use to Samantha's pick, and it's a portrait of her drawn by Giorgio Brooks. One, because we want to have artists represented, but two, we want people who, Sam may only work on Saturdays, and so Wednesday people may not know who she is, even though she's been here for all 15 years, to let them know, hey, Challengers is not just Patrick and Dow and now Molly Jane, it's everybody who's part of it. And just finding people, and every year we do a sale t-shirt. We do coming up in February is our I Love You But I've Chosen Comics sale, where it's 25% off everything from the 7th to the 13th. And if you spend $100 before tax, you get a free sale t-shirt. Every year it's a different artist that does the shirt. Last year it was James Zark, who's a Hollywood storyboard artist, and it was our biggest shirt so far. This year it's a Chicago artist named Casey Iris, who does small press books like Berry Demon and Red. And the shirt's adorable. It's amazing. And it's establishing relationships with people like that whose art we just discover and say, we want to be part of what you're doing. We want your books on our shelves, and we want you to somehow represent us at the same time. And that, to me, is the most rewarding part of what we do, is recommending a book to somebody they never heard of and having them come back and say, where's volume 2, or I love it. But the other part is showing people, being with them on their comic book journey and showing them that this means something to more than just you. This means something to a lot of people. And our Christmas card this last Christmas was drawn by Greg Titus, who did like an Annihilation miniseries for Marvel back in the day and did some Dark Horse graphic novels. And his main, most recognizable work is all the art from the Star Wars Black action figure boxes. He used to be in Chicago, but now he's in Boston. And after he was doing the card, he did this really great post on Instagram about how much, like, even though he and I met before there was a Challengers, how much Challengers means to the comics industry, and how it's my personal job, me, Patrick, not Greg, to guide people on their comic journey. And it was a thing that I'd never put into words like that before, but it made me feel like it, for lack of a better way to say it, it made me feel seen. It made me feel like, oh no, that is what I do. I've just never heard it vocalized like that before. So to still be able to do that with creators who are just starting out and readers who are just starting out is what I look forward to every year.
Patrick, that is a perfect place to finish. I love it. Thank you so much for joining me for, 6th annual, 7th annual January chat about the where things are for Challengers. I appreciate you taking the time.
It is always my greatest pleasure. I will talk up not only off panel, but sketch to anyone who will listen, and you help me do what I do. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with comics retailer Patrick Brower. You can find his shop, Challengers Comics and Conversation, in Chicago, on its website, and on Twitter and Instagram. Love Off Panel and want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following on Twitter and Instagram at @sketchcomic or following me at @slicefriedgold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Natalie M., Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian, Matteo Ciccati, Chris Dore, Nair Levy, Dennis Hoffman, Jason Hussa, Cancel Comics, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Django Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Damstedt, Rom V, Devin Fitzsimons, Nick Walker, Patrick Hoyle, Isaac Warren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narvik Studios Comics, Nicholas Palmieri, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Vandeven, Brian, Submed Industries, Raj Patel, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Bradley Rader, Carl Choi, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Garino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiamping, AbductedTheComic.com, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Philip Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pachalo, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Danny Ollie, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Demetriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ryanwan, Vita Ayala, Dave Slusher, Akil, Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outros, the show's new and returning opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off-Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.